Hello and welcome back to Football Daily, where today we've made a list of 10 managers who saved their club's bacon. 10. Pep Guardiola. In 2007, Pep Guardiola finally retired after years of injury problems and accusations of drug cheating. He went straight into management, going back to his boyhood club to take over an ailing Barcelona B-side, and after a difficult start, he got them ticking again, and the club won promotion back to the Spanish third tier in just his first season. It would also prove to be his only season with the B team, with the club looking for a man to replace Frank Rijkaard at the helm following 2 trophyless seasons. They overlooked candidates such as Jose Mourinho and took a gamble on Pep, and it paid dividends. Pep reinvigorated the squad, converting a hugely talented but underachieving group of players into one of the greatest footballing machines we've ever seen. Not only did he coach the likes of Messi and Iniesta into the great players they are today, he also promoted Sergio Busquets and Pedro from the B team to great effect. Pep won the treble in his first year at Barcelona, and in 4 seasons, he won 14 titles at the Camp Nou. 9. Sam Allardyce. Here's the usual scenario. You're an English side that's struggling in a relegation battle with a mediocre manager in charge, so you give him the boot and let Big Sam take the helm. And although that tactic isn't really working out for Crystal Palace at the moment, it's worked out for several teams in the past. Allardyce first had the task of mopping up the colossal shit Paul Ince left at Blackburn when they were in 19th place in the Premier League with 3 wins and 17 just before Christmas. He won his first game in charge 3-0 and went on a run of 10 unbeaten games, eventually leading the Rovers to 15th place. His position came endangered when the Venkies took over though, and they sacked Big Sam despite a respectable 13th place finish in the Premier League. Karma eventually caught up with the Indian conglomerate though. A few years down the line, Sunderland were in a similar dire position. They'd only acquired 3 points from their first 8 games, and once Dick Advocaat left, Allardyce became the first man to manage both Newcastle and Sunderland. In his second game, he battered his old club in the Tyne-Wear derby 3-0, much to the Mackems' delight. And despite the Adam Johnson controversy hitting its peak under Allardyce, the Englishman made some shrewd moves in the market, bringing in Karsari and Kone, who scored 2 goals against Everton in May to secure their safety in the top flight and relegate local rivals Newcastle. 8. Roberto Di Matteo. Roberto Di Matteo joined Chelsea in 2011 as Andre Villas-Boas's right-hand man, but by February 2012, Chelsea faced an early exit from the Champions League and a first league finish outside the top 4 in 10 years. The hapless Villas-Boas was eventually sacked and Di Matteo took over at the helm. The former Blues midfielder galvanised a team that looked dead in the water, and although he couldn't stop them finishing 6th place in the league, he did lead them to a historic FA Cup and Champions League double. This also made them the first side from London to ever win the Champions League. Amazingly though, he was sacked just 6 months later following the club's poor defence of their European crown. The decision was controversial with the fans, who had come to see Di Matteo as a hero, and they were angered even more when old enemy Rafa Benitez was brought in as his replacement. 7. Harry Redknapp. Tottenham may be flying high right now, but back in 2008, they were a team of headless chickens, seemingly heading for the drop. Juan de Ramos' side won the League Cup the season before, but started the league with just 1 point from a possible 12, and their star man Berbatov left for Manchester United on deadline day. It took Spurs until October to sack the Spaniard, despite their form being the worst to a start of a Premier League season in their history, and they had to fork out £5 million worth of compensation to lure Harry Redknapp from Portsmouth. Immediately, Spurs started picking up results, finishing 8th in the league and reaching the League Cup final once again, although they lost to Manchester United at Wembley. The next season they finished 4th, and their run in the 2010-2011 Champions League was one to remember. A hat-trick by Bale at the San Siro against Inter was the pick of the bunch, although Crouch scoring the winner against Milan in the last 16 was also pretty special. They made it to the quarters where they were thrashed 5-0 by Real Madrid. Domestically, Mauricio Pochettino is giving Spurs fans more hope than ever, although crashing out in the group stage of the Champions League isn't a patch on Harry's run. 6. Martin O'Neill. Seeing as Celtic have only had 19 permanent managers in their proud 130-year history, the 90s at Parkhead can be considered somewhat farcical, as the club's hierarchy chewed through 8 candidates. Before O'Neill arrived from Leicester in 2000, the Celtic trophy cabinet was fast gathering dust too, as the boys had only snared 1 title in 10 years from their rampant rivals Rangers. This period also included the infamous reign of John Barnes, whose side were beaten 3-1 by part-timers Inverness in the Scottish Cup. With the club seemingly in freefall and Rangers beefing out their ranks with the likes of Ronald de Boer, Celtic turned to O'Neill, arming him with a £20 million war chest to reverse the boys' fortunes. And signings such as Chris Sutton and Alan Thompson proved inspired, and with their talismanic striker Henrik Larsson in deadly form, Celtic romped to an unprecedented treble. It was the first time a manager had replicated such a haul since the legendary Jock Stein in 1968-1969. O'Neill made an impression on the European stage too, guiding Celtic to a UEFA Cup final, beating out Graham Souness's Blackburn and Gerard Houlier's Liverpool en route. Unfortunately though, his side were pipped to the trophy by Mourinho's Porto. In total, O'Neill won 3 league titles, 3 Scottish Cups and a League Cup in his 5 years at Parkhead. The 2 league titles he lost were on goal difference and by a solitary point. Not bad to say the least. 5. Roy Keane. Roy Keane now makes a living as a loudmouth television pundit and is generally remembered for his failings as a manager, but his managerial career actually began remarkably well at Sunderland. The Manchester United legend was signed up by former Ireland teammate Niall Quinn back in August 2006 for his first managerial role. The Wearside club had just lost their Premier League status with an embarrassing return of just 15 points across the season and had found themselves in relegation trouble again after a torrid start to life in the Championship. Keane turned things around almost immediately though, bringing in 7 players before the end of the summer transfer window, including former Old Trafford favourite Dwight Yorke. By Christmas, he had clawed the Wearside club out of the bottom half and took the team on a remarkable run in the second half of the season, winning 16 of their final 20 games. They finished top of the Championship with 88 points, and amazingly given their constant flirts with relegation, have stayed in the Premier League ever since. 4. Valeriy Lobanovskyi. Lobanovskyi has been named amongst UEFA's top 10 coaches since the Federation's foundation, and with good reason too. He made Dynamo Kiev the elite club during the Soviet era and in Ukraine since its independence from the Soviet Union. Spending 6 years as a player in Kiev, it was only natural that Lobanovskyi eventually managed his hometown club, and he did so with great success. A no-nonsense manager who was a pioneer in incorporating sports science into coaching, his first 16-year spell with Dynamo Kiev got him 7 league titles, 6 Soviet Cups, 2 UEFA Cup Winners' Cups and a UEFA Super Cup. Spells at international teams followed before one last swan song at Kiev, where he won another 5 league titles on the bounce from 97 to 2001 before his death shortly after a league game against Metalurg. 3. Lucescu. Many people won't know who Lucescu is, and that's fair enough, as despite sporadic spells across multiple European clubs, the Romanian made his name at Shakhtar, where he essentially turned them into perennial winners. Before Lucescu's arrival in 2004, the Miners had only managed 1 league title since its introduction in 1991, due to the dominance of Kiev. But while Lucescu was in charge, they won 8 in the subsequent 12 years. Add that to 5 Ukrainian Cups and 7 Super Cups, and it's safe to say the Romanian revolutionised the club. The recruitment of players during his time at Shakhtar was also immense, giving the likes of Willian, Douglas Costa and Henrik Mkhitaryan the chance to impress in Europe, whilst Dario Serna has become an icon at the club under his reign. In his last season, he led Shakhtar to a Europa League semi-final, whilst his best crack at the Champions League was a quarter-final back in 2011, losing out to eventual winners Barcelona. No shame there, Lucescu. 2. Eddie Howe. Bournemouth's rise from League 2 strugglers to Premier League regulars can be attributed to one man who's been there for 12 years. Injuries forced Howe into an early retirement, and he eventually worked his way into Bournemouth's head coaching role, aged just 32. He spent 3 seasons at the Cherries, getting them promoted to League One and almost getting them to the Championship immediately at the first time of asking. Shortly after, Burnley swooped in for prodigy Howe, and he left Bournemouth just as Russian billionaire Maxim Demin took over at the club. 2 average seasons at Turf Moor saw Howe depart for personal reasons, and he rejoined Bournemouth shortly after. Howe's work and Maxim's millions saw Bournemouth go from League One to the Premier League in just 4 seasons. And although Bournemouth might have been bankrolled up to the league, Howe was still a massive part of their success. 1. Rui Vitoria. Now running things on the sideline at Benfica, Rui Vitoria originally made a name for himself as manager of Vitória de Guimarães. In 2011, he took over the Portuguese club, whose lack of success on the field belied their status as one of the best supported sides in the country. And to make matters worse, they were in financial dire straits and had been forced to sell a host of their best players. Vitoria worked valiantly with this situation, promoting several players from the club's youth level and constructing functional sides which consistently challenged in the league despite the constant need to sell their young talent. Remarkably, in his second season at the club, Vitoria led Vitoria to its first ever trophy, beating Benfica 2-1 in the cup final. Vitoria later said, "Everything we've achieved, we've done in the background of a crisis with unknown players." Fair play, Rui.
Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Have you got any suggestions? Stick them in the comments below. And as ever, don't forget to like and subscribe.